Wait. Before we start, just want to make sure we're clear here. While this podcast talks about sobriety, mental health, and addiction, it is not meant to replace professional medical advice. Welcome to Sisters in Sobriety.
I'm Kathleen.
And I'm Sonia.
And we're ex-sisters-in-law, brought together in marriage and bonded through our sobriety journey.
Join us as we talk sobriety, addiction, and everything in between. You're in for quite a ride. And our Substack is buzzing with amazing content, from creative mocktail recipes to insightful courses and reflective exercises. There is something for everyone. Don't miss out. It's a great way to add some extra joy and depth to your journey. Check it out. Welcome to Sisters in Sobriety. Today we are thrilled to welcome therapist, writer, and speaker Oona Metz, an expert with over 30 years working with women navigating major life transitions, especially the often invisible journey of divorce.
Her upcoming book, Unhitched, The Essential Divorce Guide for Women, comes out tomorrow, and it offers a compassionate roadmap through separation, co-parenting, identity shifts, grief, and ultimately the reclaiming of self.
What is amazing is that today we're going to talk about some themes that dovetail with what we talk about here on Sisters in Sobriety, which is how women heal, how they rebuild, and how they develop healthy coping mechanisms instead of turning to alcohol or other numbing behaviors. Oona, thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I love your podcast, and it's really a delight to be here.
Thank you. So can you tell us a little bit about what drew you to this work?
Oh, absolutely. So I have been a therapist for 30 years, and in the first 15 years of my career, I was seeing individuals, mostly women in my practice, and I also have extensive training in group therapy, so I've always run groups. Then 15 years in, I went through my own divorce. And what I really wanted at that point was I really wanted to talk to other women who've been through it. Mm-hmm. I wanted to know I was going to be okay. I wanted to know my daughter was going to be okay. And I just wanted to hear from other people who had been through the journey. And nothing like this existed. I looked and looked and I couldn't find anything. And so this little seed got planted in my mind. And I thought, when I'm kind of healed enough from my own divorce, maybe this is something I'll do. And so sure enough, a couple years later, I started a divorce support group for women. It filled up immediately. It's like one of my favorite hours of my week. And then I started 2 more, and they filled immediately too. And so now I have these 3 groups going. They've been going for almost 15 years. They meet every week, and same 3 groups, different people, but same groups, same time. And it's really one of the favorite things I do. So that's how that's how my journey got started. And then, of course, I decided I should write a book because I had so much great information kind of jangling around in my head. And I thought, well, I should probably write this all down so I can share it with other people.
We've talked often on this podcast about divorce because I'm actually divorced from Sonia's brother. And
right.
Yeah.
Your sisters-in-law, right? Yes. Or ex-sisters-in-law.
Ex-sisters-in-law.
That's great.
And Sonia also.
Stop saying ex. It's so weird.
I know.
And then Sonia has also gone through
word.
A divorce as well. So we've talked a lot about it, and we've talked about grief around divorce. And at first, Sonia would get mad at me when I was like, you're grieving. So can you talk about the phases of divorce grief, and can you walk us through those and why naming them matters? I'm laughing because she was so resistant.
I was resistant to the concept of grief because what made me so mad is that it was his choice to end the marriage. And to me, like, grief was like, he didn't die. He's an asshole. Right. And I know, like, yes, it felt the same, but I think that's why I was resistant to the term grief.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So where I'm not like a,
Sure.
Yes. It was a thought.
No, I understand. Yes. But a lot of things did die, right? With your divorce, your marriage died, right? Your sense of yourself, your identity as being a married person died, right? You're kind of the myth that we all carry around that we know the future, right? Like we all have this myth, right? Like when we're in a couple,
Yeah.
oh, we're going to get old together and play with the grandchildren, and then we're going to sit on our rocking chairs on the porch, right? We all carry this myth, of course, right? That's normal. So that died too, right? Your kind of hopes and dreams for the future. So there were some things that died, and your ex is still around.
Somewhere out there.
Fortunately or unfortunately. So, so when I was writing my book, I really wanted to give people a sense of a path of grief. And so I looked at all the literature, and none of the grief literature for divorce really made total sense for me. So I really began to think, because I've seen hundreds of women through the divorce process, I've been through it myself. So I really started to think about, like, well, what is the experience? And I just want to start out by saying, like other grief models, not everybody goes through these stages. Not everybody goes through them, from first stage to last stage. Some people bounce around in between stages. So it's not a linear thing where you end one stage on a Wednesday night and you start the next stage on a Thursday morning, and never the two shall meet, right? So just to say that to begin with. But I think it is helpful for people to have a sense of a path that they're going, so that they know. Because sometimes, I'm sure both of you can relate, like when you're in the middle of a real crisis, something that's really difficult emotionally, it can kind of feel like it's never going to end.
Yeah.
Right? Like you're stuck in this whirlwind. And I wanted to give people the sense that, like, no, there is movement and things can happen. So my model of grief that I developed for divorce begins with heartbreak. And that's either the heartbreak if your spouse leaves you, that kind of, and sometimes it can be abrupt. If it's something you wanted to work on the marriage, but your spouse didn't, that can be really heartbreaking. But also, if you're the one to initiate the divorce, you have probably lived through heartbreak after heartbreak after heartbreak, every time that you were not seen in your marriage, every time you were not heard in your marriage, every time you were criticized in your marriage, every time that your marriage did not live up to what you had hoped and dreamed it would live up to. So I think it for everybody, it begins with heartbreak. And that's a very, very sad and sometimes very angry stage of grief. And I think it moves from there to the roller coaster phase. And the roller coaster phase is where you're having all of the emotions. And sometimes you're having them all of the time. And sometimes you're having two emotions which you think might be opposite emotions, but you're having them at the very same time. So you could feel both really angry with your ex and also miss them, at the same time. And I think people oftentimes feel these moments of relief where they're like, oh, thank God I don't have that level of conflict anymore. And then the next moment they might feel just so sad, or so fearful. And so really that phase is about riding this kind of roller coaster of emotions. Sometimes it's really expected, your birthday comes up or a holiday comes up or a court date comes up, and that's going to be a hard time for you, right? And sometimes it's really unexpected. Like you just wake up in the morning and it's raining and you're like, oh, my life is over. It's awful, right? But then you get up and you have a cup of coffee and maybe your friend sends you a funny meme or something and you feel like, oh, well, no, maybe it's going to be okay after all. So I like to name that because I think a lot of women think that stage is never going to end, or they think they're going crazy. And they're not going crazy. It's just a lot of emotions all at once.
One thing I really struggled with was, and you've called it an identity earthquake. And I really, and I wasn't a trad wife, not that there's anything wrong with that, but I had leaned, without knowing it, so much into being a wife and being married. And we'd been together since I was, I think pretty young, in our like early 20s. And so,
Mhm.
so what is that identity earthquake? How do we work through that? And I really think to some extent I'm still working through it. I have a really hard time checking the divorced box. I just had
Mhm.
my driver's license renewed, and it
Right.
doesn't feel like me, if that makes
Right.
sense. I think partly this is because I didn't choose to end
Mhm.
the marriage. But yeah, can you explain
Mhm.
that a little
Mhm.
bit, the identity earthquake?
I can't, and I really wish they'd get rid of that box. I don't think it's
Well,
useful. Like, what are and for people who have been divorced for 10 years and they're
mhm.
in a new committed
Yes.
relationship, or they're really happily single, or they're unhappily single, like, why do you have to check divorced? I think, sometimes you have to check married because maybe you have health insurance with your spouse or something, but otherwise it should just be maybe married if it's about health insurance, and not married if it's not
Mhm.
about, if it's about health insurance. But I don't know why we have to do all of those boxes. I think that's comes from an old sense of stigma and shame. And I think there's a lot of us who are trying to change that narrative and hope that divorce isn't such a shameful thing.
Mhm.
But I think, you know, I mean, just Sonia, to go back to your question, and then I just want to also make sure we return to the 5 phases of grief, because we got through heartbreak and we got through roller coaster. But in terms of identity, our society is still set up for couples,
Yeah.
right? It's
Mhm.
still really designed for couples. And I think, you hear that message directly and indirectly all the time, right? And so I think it is something that's really hard to get used to. And I think, a lot of women, especially, are really wired for connection. And the good news is they're really able to be connected to their friends too, right? And so, in a way that I think is easier for women than it is for men, it comes more naturally. If you ask men, who's your best friend, usually they're going to say, straight men, they'll usually say, my wife, right? But if you ask a woman, who's your best friend, they're going to say, oh, Debbie, or, Sonia, or, whoever, right?
Mhm.
Um, so I think getting to that identity piece is really important. And I think what I tell my clients when they're struggling with identity is like, what are the other parts of your identity that you can really highlight and lean into? Like, one part of your identity is, right, as part of a couple, but there's tons of other parts of your identity too. And maybe you love mystery novels, or maybe you used to be a potter, and do pottery in your younger years, and you let it go during your marriage and you want to get that back up again. Like, what else makes you who you are? Because there's a big, you've got a big pie of identity, right? And being part of a couple was one slice. And so now that that slice is gone, you kind of have to fill in the other pieces, right?
That makes sense to
So,
me. Yeah, absolutely. You have to, and I think when I work with clients who are going through a divorce, we often will talk about what were those pieces of your identity before you were married that you let go
yes,
of, because there
yes.
can sometimes be a grief in the fact that they let those pieces go, and also a
Hmm.
joy in reclaiming them.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So, Una,
Absolutely.
before we get too far off track, let's finish those phases of grief, because we talked
Okay,
about
great.
heartbreak, we talked about roller coaster of emotion.
Yep,
Is that that's a
yep.
separate phase, or is that part of heartbreak, the roller coaster?
Heartbreak heartbreak is the first,
Hmm.
roller coaster is the second. The third, I think, is mending.
Hmm.
And the way that I like to think about mending is like taking a little needle and thread to the holes in your
Hmm.
heart and just stitching it up, mending, doing a little mending to your heart. And that's really a time where you begin to think about your ex a little bit less and think about yourself a little bit more. And what is it that you need? Do you need to, go back to that yoga class that you used to love? Do you need to have a Friday night out with your girlfriends every Friday night? Like, what are the things that fill you up and bring you joy or care, that you can start to do? Because I think, going through the crisis of a divorce, it can be really hard to focus on self-care or to focus on yourself. And I think as women, we also don't, we're so socialized to think about everybody else, right? Except for ourselves. So the mending stage is I think, really an important one in terms of doing the work to refocus on yourself and taking care of yourself.
And so would that be the last phase that you would say is the mending?
Oh, absolutely not. There's 5 phases.
Okay.
The next stage is really important because the next stage is letting go. And, as we were saying, Sonia, before, it's about letting go of your identity as a married person, letting go. If you have kids, it's letting go of the identity of being part of an intact family.
Yeah.
There's now 2 separate families. And it's also letting go of the narrative. And that can be a really hard one. Sometimes people really want to have the same narrative as their spouse does, as their ex does, or as the people around them do. They don't want, they want their story to be told. And I think we do have to, in order to heal, we have to let go of that control. We have to know that your story is your story. And that's your own truth. And you're not going to convince your ex of your story 99% of the time. And maybe not, maybe in this case, you guys did a beautiful job with your in-laws being able to stay connected to them. But there may be people in your community who have a version, who have, know a version of your divorce that doesn't match your version. And there's a way you have to let go of that. And I think, so letting go of control is important, so that you can get to the final stage, which I think is moving on. And moving on doesn't mean that, the divorce is not part of you. It's always going to be part of your history. It's always going to be part of who you are, right? But moving on means you're investing in something else other than your marriage, other than your divorce. You're in, and I don't mean financially. I mean, it may mean financially, but I mean more energy wise.
Right.
What are you investing in? What are the new things that you want to do with your life? Because I always say, like, going through a divorce is like having a terrible, terrible part-time job, right?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
It takes so much time. You don't get paid for it. In fact, you have to pay to go to your job. You have a terrible boss. You have terrible coworkers. So once you get through with a divorce, the legal aspect of it, like, you're going to drop that part-time job. And then what are you going to do? Because suddenly you're going to have more time and energy for other things. So how do you invest?
I think I initiated my divorce, in the sense that I'm the one who said, I think we should separate and get a divorce. How do you see grief manifest differently in women who initiate the divorce versus those who didn't?
I think the grief is, I wouldn't say equally powerful, but I would say powerful in many ways. Because when you got married, you didn't think to yourself, well, I hope one day I'll get divorced, right? Nor did you think to yourself, well, this has a 50% chance of working out, right? Everybody who stands up on that altar thinks, like, I'm going to beat the odds. I'm going to do this. And so coming to that decision, making that decision of initiating a divorce only comes because of again, all of these little heartbreaks, like all of the times where the marriage did not live up to what you were hoping and dreaming for. And so there's grief there too. There might be also more relief, but there's definitely grief because nobody wants to get divorced. Like, that's not something we aim for ever, right?
I reflect back and, I was so grief stricken, even though I had asked.
Yes.
And I remember I had a friend who's no longer a friend, and she's actually a therapist, but I won't say her name. And Sonia knows what I'm going to say. She said to me, you didn't work hard enough on your marriage. As I was going through my divorce, like as I was in the court process.
No, note to all listeners, never say that to anyone who's getting
Never,
divorced. I
never
mean,
say that.
I've worked with hundreds of women. I have never had somebody come to me and say, "Oh, well, he left the toilet seat up, so he's a
Yeah.
great husband, but he left the toilet seat up, so I guess I'm going to leave him." Like,
Hmm.
people try so hard to save their marriages. I mean,
Yeah.
I think just about every woman who I've ever seen has worked to save their marriage for
Hmm.
years before they make the decision, the ones who
Hmm.
initiate. People work so hard.
Yeah, I
Exactly. And it's
So
usually not an overnight decision. Like it's
it,
usually not an overnight decision. So, yeah.
it could be overnight if there've been, if
Yes.
it's the straw, if there's a
Yes.
lot of straw on the camel's back,
Absolutely.
oftentimes then there's one last straw. But the other thing I want to say about that is, there's this statistic out there that 70% of heterosexual divorces are initiated by women.
Oh, I did not know
wow.
that.
Yes. And I think that it's a really important distinction to think about kind of who left the marriage and who has to end the marriage, right? So
Mm,
there are people who are married, and I work primarily with women, not all straight
mm.
women, but I see a lot of times where men are not participating in the marriage, but they're
That's
not willing
great.
to end it because it's a good deal for them, right?
Yes.
Like, why not stick around? So they've kind of left, but they're still hanging out on the couch. And so it puts the woman in the position that she has to be the one to initiate the divorce.
That also speaks to many other things, actually. But yes, like that's true. I think, and in my case, he left the marriage, but I ended it. Right,
Uh-huh.
Sonia?
That's
I was
right.
just
Yeah.
thinking, I think for both of us, you could technically say that. Like
Yeah.
this
Oh, yeah,
Uh-huh.
for
this
sure.
school was not going to initiate a divorce because it didn't benefit him,
Right.
right? So he would have kind of let
Your
it go
fool, you
through.
mean?
Yeah,
Your
my
fool, not my
fool.
fool.
No,
Mhm.
your fool's my brother, so it's hard to, yeah. But but I totally
Yeah.
agree that like my
Hmm.
brother he actually had said it to me
Mhm.
because we were really close during that time, and he had said, look, I'm just gonna sit here and I'm gonna be miserable. Like
Yeah.
he would, if you had not initiated it, he would have just sat there and like stewed in that resentment, which I don't know if women are less willing to live like that, but he was like, he almost looked at it like it was like a job to be miserable and stay in that marriage. Like he was like, I'm
Ugh.
gonna raise this kid and I'm gonna stay
Mm.
until she's 18 kind of thing. Like, and yeah,
Mm.
it was actually creepy. I remember a few times.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know it's weird we can laugh about it now. Maybe for listeners, I'm like laughing about it. It's like we have done a lot of work, a lot of
Mhm.
work.
Sure.
I'm in the moving on phase. So
Good. Good
able
for
to laugh
you. Good.
at it.
Yeah.
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 And so, Una, obviously this is Sisters in Sobriety, and we talk to
Yes.
women a lot, and a lot of times they describe drinking or, increased
Mm.
alcohol use during separation or immediately after.
Hmm.
And from your experience, why does that divorce to drinking link feel so strong?
Hmm. Well, I mean, you guys are the experts on drinking and sobriety, so I'm going to tell you what I believe, but I want you to say whether you think that's true or not, which is I
Mhm.
think that drinking is a way to not feel,
Yeah.
right? And there's so, as we were talking about with roller coaster, there's so many feelings that come up in a divorce, and it can feel pretty isolating. Like, it's weird that half of marriages end in divorce, and yet so many people, when they come to me, they're like, I don't know anyone who's going through one right at this very moment. So it can feel very isolating, and it can feel like even if you have really close friends and family, maybe they don't quite get it. So you're having a ton of feelings and you're isolated and you don't want to have the feelings. Oh, alcohol, that's a good way to not feel, right? Or, so is working a ton. So is I sometimes see people who start dating right away, and that's also a way to not feel. I mean, what do you guys think? That's what I would say. It's like it's a good way to not. It's not a good way, but it's a way. It's an effective way to not feel.
Yeah, I think
But it
that's
also means you're not healing.
absolutely what it is. And I think if people haven't, we talk about this in lots of other episodes, they don't have emotional sobriety in their life. So they may
Hmm.
be physically sober from using whatever substance they're using, but they're not emotionally sober. And so they don't have
Yep.
those practices in place. And quite frankly, like they may not. If they're in an unhappy
Hmm.
marriage, some of those practices may
Right.
have fallen away. And so if
That's right.
they aren't emotionally sober and then they're going through a divorce, I think
Hmm.
it can lead to a relapse
Hmm.
or
That's right.
yeah.
An
Yeah.
increase. Yeah. Absolutely.
I
Absolutely.
think also
That makes a lot of
grief,
sense.
like the feeling of grief. I mean,
Hmm.
grief is just so many emotions wrapped up into one. It's not even one. It's just so many emotions, right?
Yeah.
Like with
So
grief,
many.
so many emotions. And so even when you describe the phases, the heartbreak, the roller coaster, I mean, alcohol use may make it feel temporarily, very temporarily, like it's not as much of a roller coaster, but then
That's right.
it
Then it
doesn't,
is.
like then it is.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
about shame? Because
Mm-hmm.
shame is also part of us becoming sober or using alcohol. And what about shame and stigma in divorce? Does it exist?
It still exists. I mean, I think it's different than the 70s, right? I think in
Uh,
the 1970s there was so much shame and stigma, and in the 70s we thought that all children would be completely ruined by
yeah.
divorce, and now we know that's not true. Um, in fact, staying in a terrible marriage is not good for kids.
Yeah.
That's one thing we know. Um, so I think we have worked on the shame and stigma. But again, it's like 15 years ago when I started these groups, there was no place for people to go to talk
Mm,
about divorce. And I think, as Brene Brown likes to say, like shame loves to live in the darkness, right? And
mm,
once we bring some light, then shame goes away, right? So one of the ways to bring light is to be able to talk about it and to talk honestly about it. And that's what I do in my support groups is I bring people together and we talk really honestly and openly about what's going on. And so they come into the group feeling shame and stigma. Then they look around and they see there's all these incredible other women in the group who are successful and attractive
mm,
and smart and, kind. And they realize, oh, so these people get divorced too,
mhm.
right? I mean, I'm sure that's similar about people who go into an AA meeting, right? And for the first time, maybe they go into an AA meeting and they expect, like, oh, this is going to be this real down and out crowd and I don't fit in here. And, I'm professional, so I don't fit in here. And they go into an AA meeting and they realize, like, oh, no, these are like incredible people, right? Who are struggling with the same thing I'm struggling with. But it doesn't mean they're, you know, less than some
Mhm.
way, right?
What strategies do you think that you would recommend for people trying to rebuild social support after divorce or through divorce in a
Hmm.
way that doesn't default back to like alcohol-centered spaces? I mean, you have
Oh, yeah.
your groups are one of them, but what other strategies do you recommend?
Yeah, anything that takes place outside of a bar,
Yeah,
right?
exactly, right?
Or a restaurant. Yes, yes, yes. I mean, I'm a therapist, so I'm a big fan of therapy.
Yeah.
So I think going to therapy is great. And then again, it's like when we were talking about that, those stages, the moving on stage, the letting go stage. Like, how do you invest in other activities where you can find your people, right? And find people who are going to be able to support you and be a new community. Because sometimes also it can be hard when you're newly divorced to hang out with couples.
Yes.
Sometimes it's fun, but sometimes that's hard. And sometimes couples don't want to hang out with you, which is
Yes.
really
What is
sad.
that? Like, I lost so many couple friends, not because they were friends with my ex, but because
Uh-huh.
it's like, no,
Hmm.
single Kathleen. Like, what?
Right. Right, right. And so one of the things I would also say to listeners out there is like, if you have a friend who's going through a divorce, like be a good friend to them and invite them to do things. And even if it's like, I always say, like, you don't have to invite them out to dinner every Saturday night, but even if you're like, hey, I'm going to go to Target today at 2 o'clock. Do you want to come along? Or can I pick something up for you? Or I know you're going to your kid's soccer game by yourself. How about I join you? Anything like that to just give your friend who's going through a divorce a little extra love and support, I think is so important.
I agree.
Yeah. And if we can talk a little bit about your upcoming book, Unhitched, you talked about how wanting to share after your divorce and seeing that gap in what was out there. What gap are you seeing now in support that made you want to write this book?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, so interestingly, the divorce industry has completely taken off. So, we've had a marriage industry, a wedding industry for a really long time, and that is, that's booming too. I mean, weddings today are completely different than they were 20 years ago. Now you have to have the photo booth and the, videographer, all the thing, right? But the divorce industry has completely taken off too. So there are a gazillion divorce coaches now, and there's a whole bunch of podcasts, just like I would say in the last 5 years. But I think where my book is different, because there are some more books too. But where my book is different is that there's not another book that's written by a therapist about the emotional journey of divorce for women. So there are a ton of divorce memoirs out there that I absolutely love reading divorce memoirs. They're so good, and a lot of my clients love reading them too. And there's very specific things about narcissism or about infidelity, about finances or about the legal part. But there's not the book out there, and that's the book that I wrote because it's the book that I know my group members need. Like oftentimes we'll be in the group and we'll be talking and I'll think to myself, oh, well, that's page 43 of my book. Oh, that's page 189. I know that, so it is really about, I begin at the the book begins at the very beginning when you're making the decision to divorce or when somebody's made the decision for you. And then I take you through all the different stages that you go through where you're learning about it, where you're taking care, you're figuring out what your self-care is. You're telling people, you're telling your kids. How do you tell your kids, right? That's a huge one. And then taking you through all the feelings that you're going to have and how to kind of manage all of that. And then boundaries. How do you renegotiate your boundaries? Because so many boundaries need to be renegotiated in divorce, right? And then all the way through to how do you kind of think about your new identity and make your new identity after divorce. And then also like dating after divorce, because that's a thing too. And some people want to and some people don't. And both of those things are okay. But it's an issue. So I really take you through from the very beginning to the very end. And then I intersperse the book with these stories, and they're all composites from my practice. So nobody would be identifiable from my practice, but I really want women to have the feeling that they can relate because, again, divorce can be so isolating. And so by reading the stories, you can be like, yes, that's me. Oh, I felt that way. Yes, I felt that way. And by feeling that way, you feel less alone, right? And then I also have exercises throughout the book so that you can think about your experience and reflect on it, not just like power through it, get to the end, but like, what about your marriage worked? What about your marriage didn't work? What learning can you take into your next relationship if you want to have one? What about your divorce worked? What about your identity do you want to, foster? And what do you want to let go of? Those kinds of exercises. So.
Well, maybe we can just take a pause and go to dating actually for a little bit for those who want to date. What are the signs that someone is truly ready to date after a divorce versus trying to fill loneliness or distract from pain?
Right, right.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a little bit of a tricky balance, right? Because I think it's important to be able to take breaks from your own emotional involvement in the divorce.
Yeah.
Like I want people to have some level of distraction from that. But also, there's a difference between being distracted from your divorce and avoiding it. And sometimes people go into dating because they want to
Right.
avoid all of the feelings that are coming up. And those relationships don't tend to work out so well.
Mm-hmm.
And I think people tend to have a very tender heart
Yeah.
after when they've gotten divorced. And I worry sometimes if people are dating too quickly that their tender heart, it's like having a bruised arm. It hurts a lot when you hit it, right? If it's bruised. And same with your heart. Like your heart is tender. And so, especially if you've had a divorce where you haven't gotten your needs met in your marriage for a really long time,
Mm-hmm.
it can feel so exciting to meet somebody new and to
Yeah.
feel like, oh my God, I haven't felt like this for so long, whether it's physically or emotionally, like, oh wow, this is amazing. But sometimes those new feelings last and oftentimes they don't, right? And so if they don't last or if the person doesn't, if they're not feeling the same way or they ghost you, it can just feel devastating.
Mm-hmm.
So I just want people to date with caution. And I always say, like, date yourself first.
For
Like,
sure.
really spend some time figuring it. Because what's dating, right? Like, dating is spending time with somebody you like, doing something that you like.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to figure out first, like, what do
Exactly.
you like to do, right? Like, you might have forgotten what you like to do because you were in a marriage with somebody who was doing what they wanted to do or who
Mm-hmm.
didn't like to do what you wanted. So like what do you like to do? Like sometimes I think people when they're dating they go out and they're like, how can I be liked?
Mm-hmm.
Right? I want this person to like me. Well, don't forget about the part where you have to like the other person,
Mm-hmm.
right? Those are some of the things I would say. I would also say like really date somebody's reality, not their potential.
Oh, absolutely. That's a huge thing.
That's a
That is
Yeah,
Kathleeniism.
that is. I say that so much.
yeah.
Yep.
Like, if you are somebody who likes a fixer-upper,
Mm-hmm.
like, be so careful because you really, really need to keep your eyes and ears wide open
Mm-hmm.
and really pay attention to what the person is doing rather than what they're saying.
Absolutely.
I love
You
to
know?
like date yourself. I will say like I usually need like practical strategies and I didn't understand it when people would say that to
Mhm.
me. And so
Uh-huh.
my therapist did say once, she said, "What do you like to do on a Friday night?" I was
Yes.
like, "Oh my God, I literally do not know what I like to do
Uh-huh.
on a
Yeah.
Friday night." So
Mhm.
so with that as one example, what's some other kind of groundwork that you encourage people to do before they open up those dating apps?
Yeah. I mean, even to go way back to the very beginning, like I even encourage women to like be mindful when they go to the grocery store when they first get divorced. Like you're so used to buying things that your
Yeah.
ex likes or your kids like, or like take a new route in the grocery store and really hone in on like what do I like to eat? Like it's as simple as that, right? But that's some of the exercises I have in the book is like really figuring out when you're dating yourself like what is it that you like to do the best? Like what do you like to have for breakfast? Or are you on the weekends like are you a city gal or do you like to be out in nature? Or maybe a little of both, but like what is it that really lights you up and kind of making so one of the exercises is like really making a list of like what are those activities that you love to do for yourself
Mhm.
before you go out because otherwise you could get trapped in like oh well this person I'm dating really loves to do that so I'm just going to go along and I mean it's nice to be flexible. It's nice to try new things that other people like, but not at the expense of your own identity and your
No.
own wants and your own needs, right? And I think women are so socialized to like
Yeah.
pay attention to everybody else. So getting divorced actually presents an opportunity, I
Mm-hmm.
think. It's always heartbreaking, but it's also an opportunity to really rethink, like, what do I want? What do I need? What do I like?
I really saw it as an opportunity, actually. Like, even though it was in deep grief, I remember having this thought of
Mm-hmm.
this is going to be my greatest catalyst for growth. I know it's like
Yes,
weird, but I thought about it and it was. It really, really was. I
absolutely.
transformed as a person. Mhm.
Absolutely. I see it all the time.
Mine
What
was
Yes.
are
simpler. Sorry, mine was like, if I don't die, I'm gonna be really cool. Like that was how I felt. I was like, if this
You were
isn't,
like, I need to survive.
but if I do, I'm gonna be
Uh-huh.
awesome after this.
Yes. Yeah. And
some
it's so hard to know that in the beginning, right?
yes, it is.
It's so hard to know that, but it is so true for so many people.
Like if I get up off the couch, I'm gonna do something really good. Yeah.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
What are some of the landmines that for women who are newly divorced that you see when they start dating? Like I think you kind of mentioned one actually, just,
Hmm.
just just doing what the new person wants, like not using that
Right.
almost as a crutch, I guess, for not exploring
Yep.
their own identity. But what are some of the other
The other
landmines?
ones.
Yeah.
Um, Well, certainly for somebody who's sober, thinking about who their partner is and
Mm,
what the person they're dating is, what their relationship is to sobriety, I would say is also a big, one to be careful of. And I think also then like figuring out what you want. Some women who I've worked with are like, I want to go out and have a lot of sex,
Mhm.
right? And other ones are like, I want to find another person to settle down with,
yeah.
you know? And so really being clear with yourself what you want, because I think, if what you want is a long-term relationship, you can get, blinded a little bit by the sex part, right? By the attraction and by the all the chemicals that kind of
Mhm.
course through our our whole bodies when we're in a new physical relationship that feels good. And so if you're in a new physical relationship that's feeling really good, that's great if you want a short-term thing or if all of the other things are lining up too,
Mhm.
right? But you also have to really, because that can be blinding, that kind of attraction. So you have to really be thinking about what are the personal qualities that the person has? What are their values, right? That they have. And do their values align with my values? Um, do their hopes and dreams, their personal qualities align with mine? Not just do we align in bed? Unless you want to go out and have sex, which is totally fine. Just be safe. But, you know, some people want that, especially if they've not had any sex in their marriage for a long time, which a lot of women haven't,
Yeah.
so they think that they're broken in some way. They think like there's something wrong with me. I'm not a sexual person
Oh, for
anymore. They get
sure.
divorced, and all of a sudden
Yeah.
they're a sexual person.
Yeah, or
you
they've
know,
been in a marriage
turns
and
out,
they've been having what I call duty sex, right? Like it's not
right? Yes,
necessarily fulfilling to them.
right.
Yeah,
The
Girl,
obligation,
the
stop
the
talking
obligation.
about my
obligatory sex.
marriage. Girl, we just put an episode out about that. It came out today about the infidelity and like how I was having duty sex.
Yep,
Oh,
yep,
You're not
yep.
alone. Like this
So
is why
common. You are not
I'm a
alone.
couples
You are
therapist.
not alone.
I'm a
yeah.
couples therapist. I can't tell you how
Correct.
much I hear about duty sex day in,
God.
day
Yep.
out.
And I'm not
Yeah.
even going to repeat the stuff he used to say because I just repeated on the last
Yeah,
episode
let's
about
move
like,
it. Yeah.
yeah, you can't send me out with a
Hmm.
loaded gun.
Mhm.
So Una, what about, I know, right? He's so cringy, but so that's a boundary, right? That I had to learn to set was like not having sex too quickly when I was dating because I learned that I am somebody who gets like super attached. And so I have a
Ah,
girlfriend that's always like, you get the oxytocin. This is what happens to
that's
you.
right.
And I start making bad
Yes.
decisions. And so I learned
Yeah.
that over time.
Good.
And so
Good
what are
for
some
you.
other I have some like it's kind of think of them as like bumpers on like my life that prevent me from in a good way, from getting too serious too quickly with, people. And one is like, I have my family in Toronto. And so I'm not going to not spend time with them for somebody else. I have like kind of a schedule where I know where I'm going to be. And so what are some other boundaries that you recommend women can set up for themselves when they're dating to kind of keep themselves safe?
Yeah. I mean, I think for one of the things that's good news for people who are parents is that they have kids. And so I really recommend that you go very slowly about introducing anybody to your kids. And sometimes that can act as a boundary.
That's
like
right.
say you have your kids either every other week or, 3 days a week or whatever, you cannot meet your date on those days, right? And so that puts a kind of the brakes on a little bit so that you can move slowly. And there's nothing wrong with having brakes on, right? So I think people get so excited they want to move quickly, but we show each other the best parts of ourselves in a very brand new relationship. And yes, I think we get blinded by oxytocin too. So I think you can't really know anybody. You can't know somebody well for a very long time. I would say you have to go through like every season of the year. You have to see, when it gets to winter, like what are their sweaters like? Are they wearing ugly sweaters? You have to be with somebody through I think you have to be with somebody through something that's really great that happens to you and to them and see how they react and how you react. You have to be with somebody when you get sick, when they get sick, how do they react? Or when something really hard happens, like how do they respond in that moment, right? And that's not going to happen in the first 3 weeks of dating unless you have a crazy life that you're going to have a big success and a big disappointment and, something crazy happening. So it really takes time. And, as I was saying before, like it's so important to not introduce your kids too early because you don't want your kids to go through getting attached to another person and then losing that person, getting attached to another person. Absolutely. And also your kids need your attention after divorce.
They do, yes.
Right? Because they've just gone through something too. And so dating takes a lot of attention, it can take a lot of mental energy. And that's mental energy that would be good to spend on your kids in the beginning.
So for someone who's newly divorced and stepping into their new identity, what are 3 tangible first steps towards rebuilding?
Take your time.
Okay. I mean, I'm going to repeat myself a little bit,
okay.
which is I think really figuring out what it is how you like to spend your time. What it is that you like to spend your time doing. And one of the ways to do that is to think about your younger self, because like, for instance, when we're kids, we're in our activity, hopefully, if we're not in a terrible, traumatic family, but hopefully as children, we're kind of in our playful, most free state, right? And so we might gravitate as kids to a certain sport or a certain art form or something like that. So think back to when you were a kid and what is it that you love to do, or your younger self. What did you love to do? And can you pick that up again? I also think one of the exercises I lead people through in the book is to interview their friends and to say, and you can use my book as an excuse, even if you don't buy my book, it's fine. I read this book and it told me I'd had an assignment in which I had to ask my friends what my best qualities are. Because sometimes it's so hard to see them in ourselves, but your best friends see them so clearly, right? And so asking your friends for that, doing that assignment of asking your friends, what are my best qualities? That can be really helpful.
I've definitely done that.
And
it was a great
Have you?
Yeah.
Right? It is. And your friends are happy to do it. It's not like they have to think about it.
Wait,
They're
you did
like,
do that.
okay.
You did that.
I did it with 3 people. I did it with 3 of the closest people in my life, and you were one of them. Yeah, I did do that. I'm telling you, I did.
Right?
Yeah, you did.
And was it surprising what they said? Or like pleasing?
It was pleasing. It was maybe a bit surprising too. I can't remember. I have them written down actually in a journal from a few years ago. But yeah, it was surprising. Yeah.
And I also I am really personally I'm really into mantras and writing things down that you want to have occur. So my refrigerator is full of all of the things that I want to happen. The other little trick I'm going to tell you that I do is you know how we have now these days like hundreds of passwords for everything?
Yeah.
Like everything you ever do online or anywhere, you have to make a password. So make your password something that you want to manifest. Like, Sonia, if you want to find the perfect date, right? Make your password the next time you have to redo your password, make it dream date 123 or whatever. So that every time you're putting in your password, you're typing in dream date 123 or feeling loved or feeling cherished 678 or whatever the thing is. So that it's just like a constant, you know, that idea of these affirmations that if you constantly say something out loud or you think it out loud, think it in your mind or you type it in, like it will come true. So that's what I would say as my third tip for your
Those are great
new identity.
and very tangible. So thank you for offering those. Yeah.
I love that because I have a really hard time with like affirmations. They feel like cringy,
too cheesy.
Yeah. And so the password thing I really love. It's like, well,
oh, good.
Password anyways. So
good.
So Oona, your book comes out tomorrow. What do you hope women feel and know about themselves when they finish reading it?
A couple of things. I just really hope that women feel like they're not alone. So many people have said, and a lot of the endorsements on the book have said, this book is a companion. You know, it's going to come out in paperback, so it's an accessible price point. It's also going to come out in audio, so you can have it in your ears if you need it in your ears. So I want the book to be a companion and to help women just get through from the very beginning to the very end. They can go chapter by chapter, they can start at the beginning and go to the end, or they can just go, oh my God, I need to know about my kids. I'm going to look at chapter 7 right now. I'm going to skip the rest. So I want them to feel like they're not alone. I want them to feel like they're going to be okay eventually. They have to do the work of the grief work, but then they can transform. And I want them to feel like they're not crazy. Like you're going to have a lot of feelings, but that doesn't mean you're crazy. It just means you're having a lot of feelings. And frankly, it's better to have a lot of feelings than to not. I worry about the people who come in and say, I don't really feel anything. I mean, I don't have those people. I don't know who I'm kidding. I don't have those people. But if somebody came to me and said, I'm getting a divorce and I feel nothing, I would be very worried about them.
Probably find my ex. He's out there somewhere not feeling anything, I bet. Yeah.
But, you know, that's going to kick him in the ass, frankly.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, I mean, that's not good. That's not healthy. And that will result in medical problems. It's going to result in repeating patterns. I mean, so.
Well, thank you so much, Oona, for joining us today. It has been such a pleasure to have you on and talking about a subject that Sonia and I do often talk about. So thank you so much. And
I love talking to you
on your book.
Thank you. And I also just wanted to mention, if people can't afford the book or they don't want to buy the book, I do have a website. It's oonametz.com. It's OONAMETZ.com. And it has a ton of free resources. You don't have to put in your email. You don't have to sign up for anything. There's just a lot of free resources there about recommended books and legal and financial self-care stuff. So feel free to hang out on my website anytime.
That's amazing. Thank you all. We'll link that in our show notes for sure. So thank you. And thank you all for joining us for Sisters in Sobriety, and we will see you next week.
This was Sisters in Sobriety.
Thank you for listening and being with us today.
If you want to learn more about sobriety and meet your community, find us at sistersinsobriety.substack.com.
Are you a sister in sobriety? Then reach out on social media. We'd love to hear from you.
If you're feeling generous, leave us 5 stars and a review and follow us wherever you listen.
You'll never miss an episode. Until next time.